music cues, soundtracks that always hit the soul very deeply. With this one, every time I hear it, it's the urge to dig. It's the urge to plan out sleeping quarters, crafting sites, and the hope of digging correctly, digging in the right direction that I don't accidentally hit an aquifer and immediately flood my fortress. Hi, I'm the Welsh one, and I'm taking a breather from the horrible that I've had to cover of Ubisoft and the disaster that is Star Wars Outlaws to talk about something I'm truly passionate about, Dwarf Fortress. Think of this as part review and me gushing for the next few minutes. Dwarf Fortress is a colony simulator game and also an RPG. Today we'll be discussing the colony simulator side of the game, aka Fortress mode, with the RPG mode being discussed in a later video, as the RPG mode has only just been added to the Steam edition of Dwarf Fortress at the time of this video, and I feel I haven't put enough hours into the game to really have a solid opinion on the game. Unlike other games in its similar nature, such as, say, RimWorld, which was in fact inspired by Dwarf Fortress, games like RimWorld are colony management games, while Dwarf Fortress is heavily in the colony simulator side of things. The level of depth that is seen here is only something that can be achieved with a combination of years of passion and development and countless amounts of drugs, which is how I assume Tarn and Zach Adams developed this wonderful game. Dwarf Fortress has been under development since 2002 by Tarn and Zach Adams, and this is their life's work. Dwarf Fortress has been a passion project by the brothers, and they've been spending most of their years tinkering with the game, and I assume will continue tinkering away until they both pass, or they find a way to upload their minds into the cloud. I remember my first time encountering Dwarf Fortress when a co-worker of mine introduced me to the game, and when I downloaded and loaded the game for the first time and being greeted with, well, this. This is the version of Dwarf Fortress that was around back in the day, and is still available to play for free off their website to this very day. Links will be down below if you want to give it a whirl. Now remember, this was a time before YouTube. Thanks, I think I do look great for my age, thanks for asking. And I remember looking to my co-worker who introduced me to Dwarf Fortress on, well, how do I play this? Well, you don't play Dwarf Fortress, you interact with it. Now, at the time when he said this to me, I was confused and I just thought to myself he was just being one of those pompous elite assholes that say things very similar with things like wine, where they would say something like, yes, you don't drink the wine, you smell it, you breathe it, you embrace it, you let this wine tell you all of its dark little secrets. No, he meant it in the most literal sense, and years of experience with Dwarf Fortress, I finally understand what he meant, and it's really the best way to describe your time with Dwarf Fortress. Dwarf Fortress is a colony simulator management game with so many simulations and scenarios at play, it's statistically impossible to encounter the same circumstances and the same mechanics all at the same time that other players would. Sure, games will start the same. You'll generate a land with history, events, characters, and items, all this generated automatically over the course of years and decades. All this history being in a readable section of the game with a web of connections showing you the rising and falling of kingdoms, disappearances of items, murders and marriages, where you might go down this rabbit hole of reading through this information for hours on end before you even embark on setting up a fortress or exploring the land in the RPG mode. Then you'll configure your starting party. Maybe you'll have more animals, maybe more tools, more dwarves, less dwarves. Maybe you'll select a fortress in a forest full of untamed beasts that will be at your heels every second, with elves watching your every move, judging you as you cut down trees. Maybe you'll pick the mountains, very cold, very rigid, but you've got the benefits of the other dwarf kingdoms nearby, but also goblins watching. Or maybe, because you're a glutton for punishment, you might pick a haunted biome where anyone that dies immediately comes back as undead. This includes animals, because screw your chances of survival. If you want to win Dwarf Fortress, you're going to have to do it with losing a fucking tooth. I accumulated to, trying to mimic a shattered window pattern. You can throw the same rock at several windows trying to repeat the shatter pattern, but it will rarely be the same. Your fortresses are the same. They'll rarely ever be the same, no matter what you try to line up to match up. And this is where the fun and insanity of Dwarf Fortress takes place. Many factors in Dwarf Fortress come to play, and you've got the moods and personalities of your dwarves, the certain spawns of materials and the biomes, and visitors both welcome and unwelcome to your fortress. Over on my stream at the moment of playing Dwarf Fortress, I wanted to run a fortress that would be a bastion of weapon and armor crafters, the finest in the land. However, my fortress appears to be absent of any form of iron, so I can't make steel or any cool weapons and armor. What does my fortress have? It has gems, and it has shells. Shells from a river. Clam shells. My Dwarven Fortress is now set up as the one-stop shop for all bedazzled shell-related jewelries, from rings to necklaces to crowns. My Dwarven ancestors would be disappointed in me. Now, one of the most common things that I hear with Dwarf Fortress is usually the difficulty, and when it's brought up, it's usually accompanied with this picture. Now, whilst comments of the difficulty of Dwarf Fortress and pictures of that nature are intertwined with Dwarf Fortress's legacy, I don't think it holds quite true. Well, mainly around the Steam edition of Dwarf Fortress, and it's probably scaring off a lot of new players. Since the release of Steam Dwarf Fortress, the game finally has an art style and a palette that makes the game legible, and it makes it easier to understand what's happening here. And also, it has the introduction of a tutorial. As someone who's played the original Dwarf Fortress way before YouTube ever existed, to learn how to play Dwarf Fortress, you had 3 options. Option 1, forum diving. Option 2, trial and error. And option 3, call a friend, who most likely did one of the other things before you did. New players have it way easier. Need to know how to make soap? Just quickly look up a YouTube video. Done. You'll have a 2-minute video with precise instructions on how to do it. Back in my day, we didn't have that. We had forum guides with people fucking with you. I would have killed for a YouTube guide on how to make soap back in my days of OG Dwarf. So if Dwarf Fortress isn't this, then it must be easy, right? Well, yes and no. It's hard, but it's not hard, but it's hard in not the traditional sense. The difficulty of Dwarf Fortress comes, I think, in 2 factors colliding at the same time. The first thing of Dwarf Fortress is the game will not explain things to you. It will not explain itself to you. Things will happen, and there'll be things you want to know how to do, or how to craft, or have your dwarves do something, but you won't know how, or if it does happen, you won't know why. Now, some people are really into this, having a bit of mystery in your game, and that feeling of accomplishment when you finally have that aha moment, when you finally crack the mystery that you've been trying to figure out in the game. Some people are into that, and some people just aren't into that. I, for one, am the guy that likes a little bit of mystery and having that eureka moment. But every now and then, when I'm really struggling, I would love the game itself to be able to tell me this without me going into the wiki. I'd like there to be options in the game where the game would just go, hey bud, come here. You've been struggling for 20 minutes to learn how to make cheese. It's really embarrassing now. I can see you looking around for it, and it's not getting any easier. So if you want to make cheese, you need this, and click over here. Okay, good. All right, you go get him, champ. You've got this. Dwarf Fortress will not coddle you and will not explain itself. Hell, it'll even withhold information from you, and you'll get this sort of impression from the game when you first embark into Fortress mode. You'll see when you first start the game, you'll get rough estimations of your supplies, and until you specifically hire a dwarf as a bookkeeper, these numbers will be a mystery to you. And I've never seen a game do this. So that's the first difficulty that comes into play, which on its own, manageable, easy. You can handle it. But it's when combined with the second form of difficulty that comes in the game that the chaos ensues, which is the sheer number of systems at play. Combining this with Dwarf Fortress not explaining itself to you, and these systems are not half-assed systems, they're quite full-on in-depth systems. To explain the number of mechanics and systems at play here, let me explain one system just so you can understand what you're getting yourselves into, and that will be the medical field. So let me set you the scene. You've got your fortress up and running, and then a dwarf gets injured. Maybe while you're cutting a tree down, a dwarf got a little too close to it, and the collision from the tree, because trees have collision, falls down, hits him in the head, injures him. Or maybe the dwarfs, good old-fashioned tavern brawl. You know what happens when they get their drinks down them, they get a little rowdy. Either way, you've got yourself an injured dwarf. So the game will advise you, hey, good old James, he's hurt. He kind of needs some help. But what are you going to do? Well, as you flick through the menus, you'll see meeting spots, and under meeting spots, you'll see hospitals. And you know to yourself, hey, hospitals, that's how you get help. That's how you heal wounds. We'll just build a hospital. Okay, so you built the hospital. You've designated the area for the hospital, but the stuff that hospital needs. So what do you need? You're going to need tables, beds, a chest to store the goods, and something called a traction bench? Most of that can be made with carpenters, stone carvers. Get those nice and made. But then you've also got to make the supplies as well. You've got to make crutches. You've got to make stooches. And then what about the dwarfs to actually do the medicine thing? You can't just hire them straight there. You're going to need to hire a chief medical dwarf. I guess the chief medical dwarf's going to get his... No, the chief medical dwarf doesn't get their hands dirty. They're not going to be stitching wounds and bringing clean water. Clean water? While they're in there, they need access to clean water. Do you have a well nearby? A river? And then, of course, there's going to be wounds there. Wounds that need soap. Soap cleans wounds. How do you make soap? All of this is just to get a dwarf back on their feet, and I've skimmed on the details. You'll get the basic tooltip guides, sort of pointing you in the right direction, but the whole process, that's trial and error, YouTube videos, or looking on the wiki. This is where the difficulty of Dwarf Fortress comes in. It's the levels of processes, the heightened requirements as you're trying to work these things out. You might be at the time working on work orders for your farms. Work orders being large numbers of orders or repeating orders under certain circumstances that you can arrange for all your crafting supplies. But as you're setting all this up, getting your farms all automated so that you're never low on food, you're digging deeper looking for ores, and you accidentally strike into a chasm where you accidentally stumble upon a forgotten beast that begins burrowing towards your fortress. So now you've got to put that on hold as you drum up your squad of dwarves to quickly defend yourself. But all while that's happening, your food supply was getting dangerously lower and lower because you weren't paying attention. The Steam edition of Dwarf Fortress will guide you through the basics through its wonderful tutorial, but once the tutorial's over, you're kind of left on your own with just basic tooltips. It's possible to work through trial and error, and honestly the game is most rewarding through this method. But it is definitely one of those have the wiki open types of games. The level of simulation in Dwarf Fortress is absolutely insane, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It tracks things from like the seasons of weather, to migration patterns, to weights of materials. Almost everything is accounted for in some way. There's even a famous story in Dwarf Fortress's development of the level of simulation at play here. Years back, players were reporting to the brothers that cats were dying in their fortresses due to alcohol poisoning, with no means of being able to tell animals not to drink the alcohol. Now, to the brothers, these reports were quite unusual, because cats were programmed not to drink alcohol. So how could cats be dying of alcohol poisoning? Well, more and more reports came in, and they started an investigation. And through the investigation, they found what was causing this to happen. And what was happening was cats would wander through the fortress, eating rats and other vermin, and would eventually go into taverns. And the taverns, their floors would be coated in booze because glasses and cups would break, or dwarfs would just be very messy and would spill alcohol on the floor, causing a puddle. The cat would walk through the puddle of alcohol would transfer onto their fur, and then the cat would clean themselves by licking their fur, consuming the alcohol. This moment, I feel, is one of the key moments that separates Dwarf Fortress from a management game into a simulation game. I mean, what other game can you think of where something like the cleaning habits of an animal are affected by the actions and designs of another system, like the cleanliness of a fortress because somebody spilt a drink. These events that spring up don't instantly ruin a run. The game plays at a very chill pace and gives you time and ways to work around a problem that pops up. But even if you don't figure it out, it's part of the fun. Just watching everything you built up just crumble through one or two bad decisions that you might have left unattended or delayed to the very last second. You could have events like I've had, like digging into a lava river where you thought you could control the flow of the river and have a really cool design. Instead, you accidentally channeled it into the staircase and flooded half your fortress full of lava. I now know to prepare better. You could have a dwarf get into a drunken brawl with an elf in your tavern and start a race war that you can't win because you never prepared your military. Or you could have just made your tavern just for locals only. But now I know for the next run. And these are just some of the stories that I've had with the systems that I've encountered. And there's still plenty more systems I'm yet to engage with. There's still plenty of systems I'm yet to engage with. Like, I haven't engaged with the pumps and funneling systems to be able to move and channel water and lava around. And there's still more systems like that I'm yet to engage with. Dwarf Fortress is the most unique game that you'll ever interact with. The stories that you'll have here, when you tell them to other players, will either have them smiling, laughing, nodding, or just shaking their head because, well, they've been there. But the game's not for everybody. Dwarf Fortress won't hold your hand, and it is a very have the wiki open sort of game, and some people just aren't into that. Some people don't want to have a wiki open to be able to tell how to smelt ore. I love Dwarf Fortress, but there are systems in there that I do get annoyed with. Like the notification system not really grabbing my attention for what I think are critical events that I would really like the game to grab my attention. You will get ping notifications up in the top, but if you're not watching that section, important information might gloss over, get passed through, and you may not be able to react to it in time because you were engrossed in something else. Petitions will come up for requests, maybe for guild halls or temples, but there's no location to track the petitions that you've agreed to. So if you haven't paid attention to what you've agreed to, and you don't fix these up in a timely manner, there's going to be some angry dwarfs. I've been the Welsh one. I'm not an experienced Dwarf Fortress player. Hell, I wouldn't even call myself an experienced Fortress player. But I would call myself a casual who gets a hyperfixation on Dwarf Fortress that pops up every few weeks. This has been my experience with Dwarf Fortress, and honestly, I wouldn't trade it for all the shell-covered jewels in my fortress. If you've enjoyed this review/gushing session of Dwarf Fortress, feel free to give me a like, comment, and subscribe down below. It really lets me know that you've enjoyed this content, and gives me that dopamine hit that I'm so desperately craving that I never got enough of in school. We also stream Dwarf Fortress and other nerdy-ass games over on my Twitch channel, and I would love you to stop by and say hi. We're a great bunch of guys, and I would love to have you by. Anyway, until next time, you have a great one. You know, I'm going to try channeling the lava into the river and just see what happens.